Hello, folks, and welcome to our webinar today, Cloud 101, Embracing the New Technology Age. This presentation is brought to you in partnership with Alaska Safety Alliance and Arctic IT. On our call today are Dave Bailey and Andrea Gonzales from Arctic IT, and Carrie Whitfield from Alaska Safety Alliance. Carrie, would you like to say a few words to the group?
Morning. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about cloud technology. The Alaska Safety Alliance is excited to work with Arctic IT to bring a series of learning opportunities over the next few weeks. The information that will be shared during this webinar is especially critical during this time of unique changes. We will find ourselves facing both personally and professionally in our roles some of those challenges. I've definitely experienced a few of these myself already, so thank you guys for hosting these. I really appreciate and we're really happy to partner with you. So for ASA, switching gears to work from home during a worldwide pandemic was a pretty good challenge. It certainly brought a few of our challenges to light. I'm sure we weren't the only ones dealing with them. So thank you for joining us today and AIT. And I hope you find this webinar to be an hour well invested. I've certainly taken a few of these classes myself. I'm pretty impressed with the way AIT puts these on. So I really do appreciate you guys doing this. This is something that helps me as well and our team. I want to add something real quick before I'm done. Thank you, AIT, for supporting us while we were on this. I'm not going to call it a COVID vacation. We worked harder, maybe possibly, out of the office than we do in the office today. Absolutely could not have done it without you. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Carrie. That was a very warm introduction. I do appreciate it, and we love working with you folks. My name is Andrea Gonzales. I serve as the account executive for the Alaska market for Arctic IT here in Anchorage, Alaska. And I've worked on facilitating discussions regarding technology with new and existing clients, hosting strategy sessions to review, things like cloud technologies. And I've been working with the Alaska Safety Alliance for the past 2 years, and I've been a witness to their incredible growth. All of the different things that they offer now with that level of increased services that they're offering, there's many technology decisions that they had to do, implementations, and so I'm proud that they partnered with us to make many of those decisions. Arctic IT is always exploring new technology and reviewing what's matured enough to offer the market in general and specifically our managed services clients. Gone are the days of the cloud being an obscure notion of, what do you mean you're putting my information in the cloud? So that said, there's always going to be questions about the appropriateness of leveraging cloud technologies to meet your business needs, and thinking holistically, is it a better or more cost-effective strategy than keeping things as they are? So to lend some insight into this conversation, we've requested that our president and CEO lead a discussion today on what all that means to you and how you can make some more informed decisions on that topic. So I'm going to hand the conversation now over to Dave Bailey.
All right, well, thanks so much. We'll jump right in. One of the things we're going to go through today is an analogy about the cloud and what it means to business as we look at kind of the history of things as a service. Nowadays, there's not too much you can't get as a service, and one of the things that's occurred at a much more rapid pace over the last 4 or 5 months, of course, is new services popping up all over the place. So we'll talk a little bit about that impact, what the cloud really is, the steps in which people will migrate their businesses to the cloud, and some of the different caveats and advice we can provide there. A real world example that we've done down in the lower 48, that pretty large cloud environment, and then what a modern workplace has started to mean. Some of us were thrown into that, some of us eased into it, as Carrie mentioned. So we'll talk about that, and then some Q&A. I think it's important for everybody to start right out of the gate to acknowledge that the cloud is not a destination, it's actually a capability. And what frames that up really well is, you think about the fact that we have the Alaska Safety Alliance, and traditionally, if you look at the business impact and services and advisory and compliance type things that they've participated in over the years in that Alaska marketplace and the industries that they've worked in, not too many times was the cloud considered a component of safety. So the premise there is We're looking at cybersecurity. We're looking at business continuity. We're looking at emergency services being able to continue in a distributed workforce and remote workforce, and different types of disasters or tragedies that can occur. The cloud is a capability that enables a broader sense of safety, a broader capability of safety. And cybersecurity in and of itself is a massive component of safety. If your operating systems and the applications that your business depends on are not working properly, and you're in any type of industry where safety is paramount, needless to say, it's going to put you in a bad spot. The other component of that is health as it relates to safety. When you're in a global pandemic situation, health automatically becomes a massive safety issue, and technology is a strategic component of being able to determine health, safety, capability, operating standards, and it's really kind of come together. So this partnership and this relationship with the Alaska Safety Alliance, it's not just an Arctic IT and Alaska Safety Alliance thing. This is a global thing that's occurring where technology, cybersecurity have become a major aspect of safety throughout the world. So when we look at cloud versus on-premise, on-premise means your server resources are sitting there inside a server closet or in a server room or however your business is situated. It's pretty easy to understand if I use the idea of electricity. And what's amazing is we've all been getting electricity as a service to our homes. We take it for granted. It's an expectation that, when I flick on a switch or I plug something in, electricity is there. But the reality is there's a lot happening to get that electricity to your door, to your house, right? Whether it's generated with coal, natural gas, wind, whatever the generation is. And then there's several steps that condense and expand that electricity to make it travel the distances it has to go to get into your home. And there's different flavors of electricity, 110, 220, industrial type requirements. So if you think about it, we're just sitting out there on that house at the bottom of the slide in step number 8. It's just electricity, it shows up, it's a service. When we think about technology, hardware, software, and all the components in the technology that we use, we have a mobile phone, we have a laptop, we're so plugged in to all the different tech we use today. Some of the things we have to understand about the cloud is that when we take a business application off the ground, if you will, and put it up in the cloud, I don't have the hardware, the application expense anymore. All that stuff moves up. If I need to increase the amount of power or increase the amount of resources I have because maybe I have a seasonal type business, I can do that in the cloud without adding hardware or capital expense. I'm not maintaining my power source and all that stuff and everything else that's required for that hardware to run inside that cloud. Similar to the description at the bottom and the image that you see there, I'm not worried about whether or not somebody's replacing one of the transformers downstream in step 2, 3, or 4 when that power is getting to me. I could care less. As long as I have electricity at my house, I'm good. And there's more than one way for electricity to get to my house. Believe it or not, most of us in a grid, there are several ways where power can be cut off from that grid and then rechanneled to get to your house, right? So there's lots of things happening up there from a maintenance perspective that you're no longer responsible for because you don't have those physical servers and pieces of hardware sitting inside your building. And then fault tolerance and geo-redundancy is a very valuable component of the cloud. For example, we're using cloud services to present to you right now, of course. I'm located here in New York, about an hour out of Manhattan. You guys are up in Alaska. We're talking like we're sitting across from each other. if the servers or the internet connectivity has trouble between where we're meeting and where we're trying to interact together online, there are many fault tolerant and redundant, geographically redundant data centers that are hosting what we're working on with you right now. So it's a pretty interesting way that you can take your small business, medium-sized business, enterprise business that was traditionally focused in one physical location. You can put it in the cloud, and instantly you have the ability to deliver anywhere, anytime, any device with the technology that your employees and your customers depend upon from you to be able to do business. Right? So that's just a little bit of an introduction of electricity, where this is something that you take for granted. The cloud, it is a very similar type thing. Wouldn't be complete without a little history lesson, right? When you think about electricity and that image that I just showed you on the bottom of the slide, businesses back in the industrial era were responsible for generating the electricity or the power they needed to drive their enterprise manufacturing. If you go back into the late 1800s, not too far from here in Troy, New York, and then down into the Thomas Edison era, if you will, he said, well, I'm generating more electricity than I need in this manufacturing business. And if you've ever read a book called The Big Switch, it's a pretty interesting story, but and then my neighbor's generator broke down and he said, hey, can I tap into your electricity? He's like, sure. They split the fuel costs. He started charging them a little bit. Another guy found out about it and he's like, I'm always having problems with my generator. Maybe I can tap into your electricity as well. Next thing the guy knew, he's charging two different businesses on either side of him for electricity, and his costs went to zero because they're paying for the electricity he also needs for his business. Not too long after that, he got rid of all his manufacturing equipment, bought 4 more generators, and started selling electricity to the entire industry along the river there up in Troy, New York. And that really became the first electricity as a service. People were able to get rid of the generators and the power plants that they had inside their business, pull those out, hook a wire up to the building for all the juice they needed, and use that shop space now for additional manufacturing capacity. So they were able to get rid of a capital expense, move that to an operating expense, and increase manufacturing capacity at a time during the Industrial Revolution when you wouldn't have really expected something as a service to be born. But that's how far it goes back to. Now we fast forward a little bit more current, and I'm sorry if your server room looks like that picture up there. At Arctic IT, we have the luxury of walking into server rooms that look like that, and customers will say, hey, we need this cleaned up. The good news is that before the cloud, cleaning something like that up took a tremendous amount of labor, additional hardware, and new stuff that had to get put into those racks, because clearly that's an evolution over time. Well, now when they say we want to move to the cloud, we can go in there, we can get rid of all that infrastructure. That can become someone's office or a storage closet or more manufacturing space if they were in that type of business. And the cloud looks just like that bottom corner picture you see there. So that is thousands upon thousands of servers. And inside each one of those servers, there are more and more virtual servers. So one physical server turns into multiple servers. And they're all redundant with redundant power supplies. There's additional internet connections and back panels to make sure that they're constantly operating to deliver to you 99.95% uptime. Now, I don't know about you, but the picture in the top right does not give me the warm fuzzy for 99.95% uptime. Right, and that's a service level agreement, SLA. And just one key point too is a few years back, I was having a conversation with my father. He's in his mid 70s, and I had to explain to him that the cloud is on the ground. And that might seem somewhat comedic, but he's like, well, then why do they call it the cloud now? At that point, you know, you got an iPhone, you got iCloud, and that was his knowledge of the cloud, still is, that's the limit of it. But it's up there. The cloud is up there. So telling somebody that the cloud is on the ground is an important concept as we proceed through our hour today, and that is you're taking your physical data center and you're picking up those resources and you're putting them in someone else's data center to gain the economies of scale, get rid of the capital expense, and make that an operating expense that you can budget, dial up and dial back as your business goes through changes. So think about if you were in the retail business and everything was in the cloud, you might have been able to scale back your cloud expense just by dialing it back on how many users or what kind of resources you were using because of the COVID experience we just had, or more appropriately to the Alaska marketplace, we have a lot of clients that are down in the cruise ship circuit or up in Denali National Park that are seasonal businesses. Well, September up until May, they really don't have much going on. Cloud-based technology allows them to run hot and fast May through September to attract business and work through all that volume that they have. And then when they get to September, they're able to turn down the amount of cloud resources that they need and will operate at a much lower cost. All right, so there's lots of different advantages there. All right, so let's talk about the types of clouds. So most commonly used is what we call a public cloud. That means that I'm going to consume things like software as a service or public storage, something to that effect where I'm using what's called a multi-tenant infrastructure in a public cloud. My stuff's up there. I have a username and password to get up to it. It's in some type of storage component or application service, and I'm paying for that on a monthly basis. Storage gets cheaper and cheaper by the day. More and more business applications start showing up for both on the consumer and the business side. And that public cloud represents a very large portion of the cloud marketplace today. Most of Microsoft, Google, Amazon, most of their cloud services and their data centers offer up public cloud services to the masses. Okay? And you have private cloud. Private cloud's pretty common in enterprise, not so much in small business, but we see it once in a while, small to medium-sized business, where I might have 6 or 7 business locations and I have to serve up technology to them, so I don't have to have server infrastructure in all 6 or 7. So I'm going to have my own internal data center, and I'm going to offer up web application database services and things like that, security services, to encompass that 6 or 7 locations. So I'm going to have my own private cloud, my own private data center. And data center, believe it or not, is the original term that supersedes, if you will, cloud, because that's really what a data center was. You might have your own, you might rent space in someone else's. That's really leveraging cloud computing. Right? And then you have hybrid cloud. And medium to large business will get involved in that, and even some of our small business clients where they're going to have some software as a service and storage applications, maybe some backup services, which is a big deal. They're going to have that up in the public cloud environment, but they still have line of business applications that they depend on, that they need operationally on a day-to-day basis, and they couldn't live without. God forbid their connection to the cloud or their internet might be spotty. A good example of an industry that will operate in a hybrid cloud methodology is healthcare or hospital. For example, Providence there in the middle of town, they have cloud operations that are all based down in Seattle in the Providence healthcare system. Some of their cloud operations are in Microsoft's cloud. Some of them are in the public cloud, but they also have their own private cloud where the Anchorage location, of course, has its own physical data center with all of its information that it needs to run. God forbid the internet gets cut off to the mothership there down to the lower 48, and they can still run autonomously, deliver services, use their computing storage power and capabilities to deliver healthcare to their folks there. But they back up and have fault tolerant and geo-redundant services in the cloud, where if they ever lost a resource down here physically, the cloud can pick up that workload while they rebuild this, back up and restore that to what it was before they had the issue. So you can see how a specific type of industry is going to depend on a hybrid cloud methodology because they need to operate in both capacities. And then we have something that's called multi-cloud. So I might have a combination of public, private, I might be using hybrid methodology, but then you heard me say earlier, Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Microsoft, for example. When right now, currently for our clients, if we deploy them in Microsoft 365 or Office 365, we'll talk about, we will use a backup service that actually backs up all their email, their OneDrive documents, which is the files they store in Microsoft's cloud, SharePoint and Teams content. It encrypts it and backs it all up into an AWS cloud store. So that's using a multi-cloud strategy. So I don't have all my eggs in one basket. I'm actually backing up my cloud to another cloud. Right? So that's something that most people from a, we'll call it a cloud 101 perspective. You might know what the cloud is, but you might not know what a good backup strategy and a good approach to these different types of clouds. So hopefully that clears a little bit up for you there on the types of clouds. Now we have to talk about the types of services that are going to be inside those cloud infrastructures. Software as a service is the one that's most common. Most people are aware of that. If you think about an app service, whether it's an exercise app or you're using SiriusXM on your mobile device or Pandora, those are all software as a service. It's a subscription. You have an app, you have a username and password, you pay monthly for it, and that app gives you access into the internet, into a cloud service, into a data center where you're able to then pull content to your device, enjoy, use, learn from it, whatever you do, right? That's just a consumer side of it. And then you get into the business application side, for example, Office 365, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all those different technologies, Outlook that we've all grown accustomed to. If you're a Google customer, you might be using G Suite. Right? Those are all different cloud services on the business side from a productivity point of view. Dynamics is something that we work a lot with. That's a business application where it's going to do things like CRM, customer service, field service, maintenance type things, accounting, ERP, you'll hear it referred to. So those are different types of software as a service. You pick the type of user you need. You're going to pay a monthly fee for that user to access the application. All your data is stored up there, and they can get to that business application from a laptop, from a mobile device, or from a desktop computer whenever they have to interact with it. Very valuable in recent situations, of course, when we all were forced to work from home to get into our business applications. If you were already up there in a SaaS business application, software as a service, you were able to roll with that a little easier. Then you have platform as a service. That's a little different. Example of platform as a service, right now we're doing some work down in the state of Washington, and we have a tremendous amount of public information that we have to interact with, where the public has to put information to an app, and then we need that to get into our back office business applications, right? Well, we use a Azure SQL service. SQL's SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It's a database service from Microsoft. We use that data service for the public to interact with and fill, and then we hook up to that to our business application. So we're using a database platform as a service. We don't need to buy any servers. We don't need to buy any software. We're just using and paying for the services and resources that we consume on a monthly basis. Sometimes it goes up depending on what kind of public interaction there is. Sometimes it goes down. The key about platform as a service, which is really cool, is you pay for what you need. It's not a Liberty Mutual commercial, in case you guys have those up there. But you pay for what you need. And you are able to then say, okay, I want to have more processing and resource capability because I know I'm coming into a busy season. Maybe it's a tax season where people are paying their property taxes, they're registering to vote, who knows what the peak might be. But that platform, you have the ability to use dials, not physically, but inside the cloud application, you can increase how much resources you're using. And then there's infrastructure as a service, IaaS. And that means, well, okay, I just need to take the servers I have on premise and I want to put them in a cloud data center so that I don't have to have any of that infrastructure anymore. And you can pay for that on a monthly basis. And that's very similar that you might be used to today, depending on your IT awareness. If you have a server with, you know, a few hard drives in it for redundancy, and it's got this much RAM or memory capability, processor capability, well, you can go right up into the menu, up into AWS or Azure, crank up that same recipe for resources that you need, set up a service that takes everything that's on your physical server, moves it to that infrastructure. Now you're just paying for infrastructure as a service. It is no longer a capital expense. It is now an operating expense, okay? So fundamental differences between on-premise and cloud subscription. I've talked about most of these, but if you are interested and you want the PowerPoint deck, this is a pretty important slide. As you look at your own business and your own utilization of technology, and you want to understand, why am I making this business decision? What is the cost benefit, risk reward, if you will? Expense, speed, utilization, reliability, management, redundancy, and security are the key aspects that we come out there and talk to you about. You heard Andre say that he'll work with an Alaska business and they'll say, we think we have to go to the cloud, or we think we have a need or an opportunity to move there. These are those key elements that Andre and our team of engineers is listening for when we talk to your business to say, okay, you know, are we lowering the expense? Are we making things faster? Will we be able to have more employees utilize the technology because we're moving it from a brick and mortar location to a cloud? Will we improve reliability? Will there be less to manage? Will we not be so worried about if the server goes down and we lose everything? We'll have some redundancy and backup services that we don't have access to now up in that cloud. And then security is the big one. There's no one that can say that the cloud would not make them more secure with the technology they need. You used to be able to argue that. People used to say, no, my on-premise infrastructure is more secure because there's less people targeting my stuff than it would be in the cloud. But nowadays, that's actually not true. You can't even compare it to the security at scale that a cloud service can provide. You couldn't even come close to investing in that kind of security for your own on-premise infrastructure. It's not even possible. So it is very safe to say factually and very concretely today that the cloud is more secure than your on-premise infrastructure. Those are facts today. Okay? So cloud growth, just so you understand, you heard me say that SaaS is one of the bigger components. Software as a service is one of the bigger areas that people adopt cloud technology. I'm not going to go through each one of these stats, but you can see a tremendous amount of growth from 2018 to 2020. And as you look out to 2021 and 2022, these statistics were established prior to COVID. Right, COVID has, in some estimates, more than doubled the prospectus for 2021 and 2022. Right, and that seems highly unlikely. As someone in the industry that works all throughout the country, you know, if you said, "Oh, that market's going to double in a year," it'd be like that might be a little aggressive. But it's actually the situation we find ourselves in today. Right. All right. So. If you want to look at some more of that, there's a blog that our CIO, Phil Jackson, put out on our website. So I don't know the demographics of our audience, but some of you might remember seeing things on TV years ago called Rube Goldberg machines, where, you know, a board flips, a ball pops up in the air, rolls down, knocks over something, that type of stuff. This is a comedic drawing, of course, but napkin as a service is not that far-fetched. You know, if you think about the types of as a service things that we have today, you can even get your operating system. So if you use Microsoft Windows on your computer, which most of us do, unless you're using a Mac, you can even get that. The operating system you can now buy called Windows as a Service. So your device will have upgrade compatibility. You pay a monthly fee for the operating system to always be on the latest and greatest. All your updates and patches are all provided to your computer from that Microsoft service in the cloud, along with all your Office applications. We call that Microsoft 365. There's a business edition and there's an enterprise edition. Both of those provide all of your Windows updates and service and patching and security updates as part of that subscription fee, and it's updated and automatically applied to your computer. All right. So let's talk about what a cloud migration looks like. We talked about 3 different types of services: software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. First thing we need to do if we're going to look at a business, and if you are considering moving some of your operations to the cloud, some people can just move everything. They might be small enough, have a small enough server footprint, a small enough infrastructure footprint where they can say, you know what, I want to take everything, I want to move it up there. All I want is internet connectivity, and I want to be able to use everything anywhere, anytime. We have quite a few of those. Small business, small and medium-sized business can do that a lot easier than larger organizations. But with the variety of different businesses that we have in Alaska, we typically don't have a lot of one type of business. When you get into larger metropolitan areas and cities down here in the States, in Alaska, we have a lot of variety. And a lot of those organizations, for example, the fishing industry, oil field services, they have a lot of unique line of business applications that they run locally because they might not be available in the cloud. Right? And if they are, the latency or the delay or the internet connectivity that they have may not be enough. They might be able to use things like email and document storage and some security services out of the cloud, but they still might need a server down on premise because of that line of business application. Very common. So one of the things we do is we use a 9-step approach when a customer comes to us and says, we're ready to take a jump, but we're not sure what we're going to move or how we're going to move it. We go in, we discover the customer's on-premise footprint. What are all the things you have? What are the dependencies on those technologies? Are there cloud alternatives? Do they cost less? Do they cost more? Can you live without it for a day if you lose the internet or something breaks, right? Yeah, so we have to go through some of that. Then we have to map the dependencies on that infrastructure. If you have several servers, several business applications, databases, we're going to want to take a look at how all that stuff's related so that you don't have inevitably a single point of failure if you move some things to the cloud and some things you leave behind. What were their dependencies on each other? Once we get all that together, depending on the budget, the life cycle, or the business influence, do I have to move to the cloud because something's broken? Do I have to move to the cloud because I'm facing a really expensive upgrade? Maybe now is the time to move to the cloud. What is the business urgency and why? Well, we're going to look at that from a cost model perspective, because maybe you want to start small. Maybe you just want a small Microsoft 365 subscription for email and cloud storage, and you want to start there, and you want to grow into it as your business evolves. Maybe you can't afford to do a wholesale migration in one shot, and you just want to do a little bit at a time. Either way, moving anything to the cloud, even if you move one small portion of your business to the cloud today, you will immediately have become more secure than you were yesterday. That is a fact. Move one thing, and you're immediately more secure than you were the day before. That is definitely a fact as we face business today. Right? Once we come up with the workload, the cost, the money we want to spend, and what we're actually sending up there, we're going to develop that migration strategy, make sure we understand what kind of impact, right? If it was a business application, we wouldn't want to take it away on a Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon from your users. Maybe we want to wait till Friday night and take it down for the weekend, so Monday when everybody comes in, it's up, they didn't miss a beat. We prepare that environment up there in the cloud. We move a sample of the information up there. We test it out. Everything passes with flying colors. We move to production. Once we're up there in production and all our users are now using that resource, we do a quality assessment and a security review to make sure everything's cool. We document and schedule everything. And We go back to our on-premise environment, we take it away from internet access, we deprecate it, lock it down, and we take it offline. Right, so now we've completely gotten rid of that resource, we've moved it up to the cloud, and now your maintenance and your security and your support schedule is going to be on that cloud resource, no longer on-premise, no more moving parts. Those are the 9 steps. All right, so what does that look like? And I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, but I wanted to make sure you had a graphical representation of each one of those steps. Believe it or not, this really colorful picture on the right-hand side of the screen is what we end up with when we document a client's environment. You might have several servers, you might have a web portal, you might have an extranet, or you might be using SharePoint or something to that effect. You have file shares. This is what your IT folks take care of. If we're your IT folks, this is the kind of stuff we're taking care of for you. Right? All different types of components. This isn't a real big environment either. So even a small business network can be as complex as the drawing you see there. So we have to look at, and you have to have this information. If we're going to come in there and do that assessment, you know, we have to be able to tell you this is going to have the most business impact and financial impact. Well, those are 2 wins. If it's only going to have business impact, but the financial impact is way too expensive than you can afford it at a certain time, well, then you have to start weighing the pros and cons of what's most important. And that's a good way to do things because you want to have a roadmap of how you're going to approach that, because budgetarily, you have to be able to financially plan on what that means. You should see, in many cases, a cost reduction in many cloud migrations. Sometimes you might see a slightly greater expense over a longer period of time, but you have to weigh that against, was I more secure? Did I enable better access? Did I increase reliability and redundancy? And all those other things that you couldn't tangibly attach as costs to your on-premise comparative analysis. So there's a lot of different things that go on in that process. And that's our expertise, right? Any of your IT services provider, if it's not us, whoever they are, they'll work with you to make sure that this is the information that you should be asking them and getting from them to say, this is a good move, this is too expensive, but it makes you more secure. You don't need to move this. Just leave it right where it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's secure, you got good access to it, it's great. No need to move, right? Mapping dependencies. This is an example of what it looks like, right? We're going to map the dependencies of the database servers, the end users, all the different applications that you have. Really important step, because as a business owner or the business leadership, they're going to see visually and graphically, okay, this is everything I got. It's really important to have a visual representation of this is what I'm looking at. These are all the pieces. So that way, when you move something to the cloud, you have a visual representation of where it physically is after the migration. Okay. Recommended path. Remember I told you earlier, you go up into Azure, you're going to get a menu. This is a screenshot of a server that we migrated up there. We're going to put it in a data region called the West region. I want to pick the operating system. I could pick Linux, I could pick Windows, whatever I want. I'm going to pick Windows, just the operating system, a standard tier machine. And then I'm going to say, I want a DS13-4, which would mean nothing to anybody on the webinar today, but it's going to have 8 cores. It's going to have 56 gigs of RAM and 112 gigs of temporary storage at a cost of 82 cents an hour. 82 cents an hour. Virtual machine in the cloud to run a bunch of stuff on. Great. If I do a 1-year reservation, I get a 57% discount. Average cost per month, $333 a month. But now I want to increase my storage. I want to increase the number of disks, and I want to have a snapshot of that server, right? I want to have a snapshot of that server every single time that I use it. And I can start putting that all together. But $600 a month for a smoking server that's fully backed up with real-time snapshots and the operating system and everything on it, you can't do that on premise. You can't buy that server on premise and get all that capability. Not to mention the fact that you still have to back it up on premise, you have power, and you have maintenance and all the work you need to do to take care of that server. So that's just one example of going up, picking the menu I want for that infrastructure or platform as a service, and I'm ready to go. All right. And then we have a cloud migration strategy. Okay, well, we have to look at the different types of applications. For example, here is paychecks. If I'm doing payroll on premise right now and I'm paying for all that software, well, that could be at quite an expense, right? So if I want to go to paychecks and I want to outsource my payroll processing software, my HR, time and attendance, all that stuff, okay. Well, I want to go out there and take a look at the cost of that. 9 times out of 10 today, it's going to be less expensive to put it in the cloud than it is to be on premise. Now, when we look at, for example, different types of Microsoft 365 capabilities, you'll see here that there's business standard, business premium, enterprise level 3, enterprise level 5. I could go through all these details for hours with everybody. But the reality is one thing I want to show you is for $20 a month, which is the business premium edition from Microsoft, they give you a terabyte of storage per user in your cloud tenant. So if you had 20 employees, you now have 20 terabytes of storage inside your environment in the cloud. A terabyte, for those of us that might not know, is 1,000 gigs, 1,000 gigabytes. That's a lot. That's a lot of storage. Okay, you don't have that much storage right now, and if you do, you need to move to the cloud because you're paying a lot for it. Right? So that's just an amazing scale at an amazing cost. $20 of redundant backed up storage in the cloud, 1 terabyte per user in your subscription. All right. Then we prepare the environment. This is just a screenshot of, you can see we're going up into an Azure portal. I can see the overview of my machine, the IP address that it has up in the cloud. I can look at network statistics. I can make sure that everything's running properly. I can set up my different backup strategies that I want for that virtual machine. The same as if it was on the ground. I got to do some of that stuff up there, make sure I'm getting all my backups done, right? I'm going to move that initial data. I'm going to test it out. I'm going to see if there's any errors. I'm going to make sure all that's dialed in before we do our production move. If everything's good, we're going to lift off. We're going to send it to the cloud. All data has been migrated, business interruptions mitigated, regression testing is complete. Regression means that before we hang our hat on our new cloud resource, we're not going to get rid of our on-premise stuff. We want to make sure that we run in production for a little while and everything's good before we shut that down. Okay, so that's regression preparation. Backups are all most recent. Training's been completed. Where all systems go, we move. All right. Once it's up there, we have to go in and make sure that that cloud resource now has all the right security things applied to it. We have to look at the performance. You know, in the morning when people first get on, are we seeing a little dip? Should we dial it up in the morning before noon and dial it down? You can be that finite and that discrete with how you manage your cloud resources. Those kind of adjustments might save you 50 cents a month, but you know what? You have the ability to do that. You don't have that ability typically today if you're in an on-premise environment. Always good to document and make sure where you start and review that on a monthly basis. When you move to the cloud, there is a service level agreement that the cloud provider contracts with you for, and there are different tools that'll say you're getting what you're paying for, or more importantly, you have too much storage. You're paying for too much storage, you don't need it, and it's at a premium. Why don't you dial that back? Because in the last 3 months, you've only used 85 gigs, but you're paying for 150. Why don't you dial back to 100? That way you're not paying for storage you don't need. There are many tools that help you do that as well. So cloud migration and review. 9 steps. This is a good visual for you. It's not a Rube Goldberg machine, although it looks somewhat similar. We follow these 9 steps with our clients. Sometimes if they're moving one resource at a time and not moving everything, we'll go through this process 3, 4, 10 times, depending on the size of their environment. Real world example, we have a client, a large tribal enterprise that's down in the lower 48 or in Minnesota, the Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures. They own everything from hotels to a casino to medical clinics, a very, very distributed enterprise and diverse. And as that diversity started to increase and the number of employees started to increase, having them all on their own infrastructure from an Azure Active Directory, which is managing all your users and security, backups, protocols, and compliance became a bit of a challenge. So they came to us a little over a year ago to say, we want to go to the cloud, but we're not sure how to do that from a phased approach across all of the enterprise. So their goals were pretty simple. We want compliance, any device, anywhere, anytime. We want the agility to be able to deploy things in the cloud and have all the users in all our enterprises be able to use them or not, like adding an app to your phone. We want to have, security at scale so that we can visualize all the different endpoints we have in our enterprise, but apply different security to those businesses in a different way, right? Part of their business is in the gaming, part of it is in health. So you have HIPAA standards, and then you have gaming commission and standards for both the state and the tribe itself. So the cloud allowed them to have that versatility. Migration process took about 90 to 100 days before they had full management over their cloud resources. And as of now, they have all their phone systems inside the Microsoft Cloud service as well. This is a testimonial from their project manager there at Mille Lacs. And it's a relationship, it's a consultancy, not a little tiny business, but also not a huge, billion-dollar organization. But these guys had a pretty growing enterprise. The reason I point that out is, regardless of whatever size company you are, you're still going to use those 9 steps. You're still going to have to decide why I'm moving, what's the cost, benefit, risk, and reward, right? It doesn't matter what size organization. You still get that level of enterprise consultancy if you work with a partner like Arctic IT or your IT provider to take you through those steps. You got to go through that so you know why you moved and how you got there. Okay? Once you move up to the cloud, there's other things you can take advantage of. Remember, I told you that it's not necessarily a destination, it's a capability. If you move to a Microsoft cloud environment, which is our deep expertise, there's really 3 clouds at Microsoft, the way we define it. Microsoft 365 is your Windows operating system, your Office components, right? Some of your security stack around your authentication and identity for your users. Then you have Dynamics, which is the business applications component of that. And then you have Azure, which would be that infrastructure and platform as a service, where I'm going to move my servers or my databases to the cloud. So those are really the 3 types of things you get from Microsoft. Okay. So as we look at those 3 types of things, again, where we specialize, one of the key aspects here is that you're able to use the same software and the same platform with the same user ID, the same security that you expect and rely upon to do all those different things, interact with your server resources, interact with your Office applications and your business applications. That's not to say that that's the same for everybody, but ultimately a modern workplace should support for the end user same level of security no matter what I'm doing inside the business, no matter what software I'm using. I don't want to accidentally send an Excel file with payroll data out through my email server to the wrong people. I want my cloud service to say, oh, did you mean to send that? Because this looks like it had some sensitive stuff. That's using artificial intelligence built into your cloud tenant. You'd never be able to afford to put that in yourself. But if you're in Microsoft 365, that's data loss prevention, right? It's going to help you do that. So ultimately, you have those 3 cloud services in place, or even one of them, You're going to save time, you're going to save money and resources. And with cloud technology, one of the most important aspects is you get that security at scale, right? That's really the benefit of putting a resource there. So one of the things that we'll do for you, if depending on where you are in that, I'll call it a cloud journey, which kind of makes it sound like a destination, but we already established it's not, it's capability. But if you're on that journey, we'll give you a 2-hour technical investment to go through what you're currently facing, have that discussion, and give you some ideas of what would be good candidates for the cloud, what you should hold off on, where's the best money spent. If you decide to move forward with that, great, we already have that knowledge. If you decide to move forward with somebody else, either way, we take pride in the fact that we helped you have that discussion and make a choice on how to move something there to get yourself in a better spot from a security and safety perspective. One thing to remind everybody of, the artist formerly known as Prince, I always thought that was funny. He became a symbol at one point. Many of you might not be old enough to remember that, but I do. Artist formerly known as Office 365. It is now called Microsoft 365. Just when we were all starting to figure out what to call it and people started to understand what it was in good Microsoft fashion, they changed it. So it's called Microsoft 365. It's all-encompassing operating system on your computer, the Office applications, and the security that you depend upon for your users. If you want to have more questions on that, you can ask us. So with that, what kind of questions do we have?
Thanks, Dave. That was a great presentation. Let's give it a few minutes and see what kind of questions come in.
Carrie, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that really was a great presentation. I feel one of my personal concerns has always been the security side of it, not even really the usability or the usefulness of it, because that does seem like a lot of the world is using it and I need to catch up. So I really appreciate helping me catch up. I'm definitely going to be more secure feeling in what I can do and what I can have out there, especially knowing some of those security checks and balances are in place. And I'm going to sign off now. I have to go train another class. I really appreciate your time. And you did a really amazing job talking to people that were there but weren't there. I know that's always a challenge. You did a great job.
Not too many acronyms. That's good.
Right.
Okay.
And I love this lesson.
All right. Take care, Carrie. You have any questions, Joanne?
Yeah, we did have a question that came in. What is the typical duration for a cloud migration project?
Yeah, well, proverbially, we would answer that, well, your mileage may vary. If you have, let's say, 20, 30 folks and you're using an on-premise, small business server for email and maybe some storage, no reason you couldn't be moved completely up to the cloud in 30 to 60 days. And that includes training and giving you your own pace to migrate some of that stuff and really using a full project lifecycle. Some larger migrations that we do, if it's a line of business application, it's going to be different software. It's going to be migrating the data. It might be adding new features and functions that you've never had before. And that'll slightly extend that calendar, that duration. But it's, in most cases, it all depends on the motivation and the ability to absorb new tech for the customer. At Arctic IT, we're kind of jogging in place. We're ready, right? So if you got a project for us and you want us to work on it, 24/7 to get it done as quick as possible, we'd be excited for that. But that's really not a reality, right? Most organizations need to make a decision, draft a plan, come up with a schedule, get that done, prepare the organization, do a little test, do some training, and then move. So again, your mileage may vary, but if you're really motivated, depending on the situation that you're in, it can go pretty quick. But I think, again, 30 to 60 days for a small project, could be even quicker. Larger could take 6 months to 9 months.
Great. Okay. Another question. What are concerns for rural areas on unstable internet, and what would be a backup solution for this?
Yeah, great question. So, in Alaska and even in many of the tribal markets that we work in the lower 48, it's a common thing. You heard me say earlier that if you have a dependency on technology to work locally, then you can't have a solid or reliable internet connection at a minimum. Having backup services that run either off peak or whatever when you can get that bandwidth to the cloud are very, very strategic. Now, if your bandwidth is so bad where you are that you can't even get a backup service to run, well, you're going to be just fine running on the island you're on. Because if you can't get out on the internet, people from the internet can't get to you either, right? So you're pretty safe. So, and I've been on some of the islands around the coast of Alaska. Those are some pretty safe spots when you're talking about cybersecurity. But if you can get decent bandwidth some of the time, or maybe you work in a remote situation and you can come back into an office that has better bandwidth, there are a number of backup opportunities you have. Microsoft 365 definitely provides some of that capability that's built in. But if it's a data source that's on a workstation in a server or something to that effect, one of the things we use for a lot of the clients in Alaska is something called Barracuda Backup. It's a data defense product of ours. There's more than one option there, but that actually puts a device inside the client's environment, backs up all the information they have there, it encrypts it, and then it ships it to a cloud in smaller components, basically zipped up, if you will, so that there is that cloud backup. God forbid that physical resource on premise goes down. You have that cloud resource that you can then pull down or actually have shipped to you to restore from. We use that quite a bit out in some of the different village corporations that we work with and some of the schools that we work with out in the bush. So there's lots of different opportunity there.
Yeah, that's where those strategy sessions really come in handy. When we can sit down and have a frank discussion about what the business needs are, it helps us drive those decisions. We are always trying to learn about new technology and the better way to go about things. And so, you know, we might have to get creative on certain aspects, depending on what it is that the business needs are. And so
we have some,
we welcome those types of conversations.
Yeah, we have a few clients that we work with now where they will back everything up on a drive that's encrypted, and they send it to Microsoft in the mail via FedEx. Microsoft loads it to an Azure data store, then destroys the actual drive. So it's a consumable drive. And that's a Microsoft service that's offered just to make sure you have an encrypted cloud backup, and the customer actually owns the encryption key. So even if someone wanted that data, Microsoft can't give it to them because they don't have the encryption key. So it's called a bring your own key. In some of the tribes we work with, there's always a question of sovereignty of their data, right? So they get the best of both worlds. They get to use the cloud. They get to maintain their sovereignty because they own the encryption key to the data they've backed up there. And it's usually in a place where there's bad bandwidth. One of the tribes we're working with right now, for example, is Navajo. As big as they are and as large as their reservation land system is, they have really bad bandwidth, and in many markets there, they have trouble getting to the cloud. So, any other questions?
No other questions.
All right. Well, that's where I exit. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and hopefully everybody learned something a little bit more about the cloud that they didn't know before they joined. If there's any questions, there's our contact information. Reach out to Andre, and we will get our team engaged with you, provide you that 2-hour discussion about the cloud and what it means to your business, and see if there's an opportunity to work together. Hope you're all safe and healthy.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.